mention some of the history of this being. At Ezekiel 28:14, when he says, "You were the anointed cherub who covers. I established you. You were on the holy mountain of God. You walked back and forth in the midst of fiery stones." So what do these remarkable statements even mean, you may ask? What is a cherub who covers? Now, Hebrews 8:5 tells us that the tabernacle established through Moses, the portable sanctuary the Israelites carried with them in their desert wanderings, was a copy and shadow of what is in heaven. Now, in Exodus 25, verses 18 through 20, we find that God instructed the Israelites to make a representation, which is a physical model, of his throne for the tabernacle that they would carry with them into the wilderness. At either side of what is called the mercy seat, which represented God's throne, was a golden cherub with wings extended to cover the mercy seat. Now, the two cherubims, fashioned out of gold, represented real angelic beings, the great, as you will, super angels, whose wings cover actually God's throne. Now, the being God addressed through Ezekiel is called the cherub who covers. Now, remember that. The cherub who covers, indicating that he had once been one of the great angels depicted in the model of God's throne. Now, God gave these angels the awesome distinction of serving at and covering the very throne of God in heaven. Now, let that sink in. Now, many other scriptures say that God dwells between the cherubim, showing that these wondrous creatures accompany and serve him at his seat of power. And there are many, many references about them at 1 Samuel 4:4, as well as 2 Samuel 6:2, 2 Kings 19:15, 1 Chronicles 13:6, Psalms 81, and as well as Isaiah 37:16. So this magnificent being apparently held a position of high honor and distinction in God's angelic realm. This same great cherub is also described as being on the holy mountain of God. Now, in the Bible, hills and mountains are often used to symbolize governments. Did you know that? And there's a reference at Revelation 17, verse 9 and 10. Now, apparently, this super angel was given authority in the governance of other angels who number in the hundreds of actual millions. And there's some references at Daniel 7, 9 and 10, as well as Revelations 5:11. So God also said to this cherub, "You were perfect in your ways from the day you were created till iniquity was found in you," at Ezekiel 28:15. So like the description in Isaiah 14, this passage describes a created being, not a man. And this being was extraordinary, perfect, until unfortunately he sinned, beginning with pride in his own beauty and splendor, which corrupted his actual wisdom. And this is found specifically at Ezekiel 28:17. "You were filled with violence, and you sinned. So I drove you in disgrace from the mount of God, and I expelled you, O guardian." Or in certain other versions of the Bible, it says covering, O guardian, or covering. Cherub from among the fiery stones, verse 16. So this once magnificent and marvelous being sinned and was expelled from God's throne and cast away in disgrace. So Satan's sin of pride and vanity ultimately led to outright and an open rebellion against God. We see it in Isaiah 14, verses 13 through 14, which we read earlier, states this: "You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars." And remember, we said when they referred to stars, that actually translated into or meant angels. the stars of God, the angels of God, and I will sit enthroned on the mount of assembly, on the utmost heights of the sacred mountain, and I will ascend above the tops of the clouds, and I will make myself like the Most High. So this powerful spirit being decided to challenge God for control of the actual entire universe. Now, what had been an amazing and beautiful, magnificent, immensely talented spirit being with great responsibility and actually in Jehovah God's angelic order became, through his rebellion against Almighty God, a reprehensible, despicable creature. Thus, God did not create, the devil. Rather, what God created was a magnificent and perfect being. But later, this being, as beautiful and powerful as he was, by his own will, and we talked about that, God gave humans as well as angels free will. He became the devil and Satan, the adversary, the slanderer, the accuser, and the destroyer. And he made himself the enemy of God and humanity. He did that. He decided that. It was a personal choice through free will. Now, the immense powers he had used in God's service were turned not to serve God, but to try to thwart God's purposes. And this creature remains an enormously powerful spirit being. But now his powers are used strictly for wicked and very destructive ends. And as we've seen, so vain and proud did he become that he thought he should be the ruler of the universe and he should be worshipped. His enormous talents and abilities led him to believe he was equal to, if not better, than God himself. And his thinking became corrupted, twisted. He rebelled against God and tried to overthrow him, By his rebellion against the Creator, his Creator too, he transformed himself into what we know now as Satan, the devil. So now we're going to go into how Satan wasn't the only one that rebelled. He was not alone. Now, millions of other angels joined him in rejecting God's authority and leadership. And we find this symbolically described actually in Revelations 12:3 and 4, where it says, "And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great fiery red dragon. His tail drew a third of the stars of heaven." Now remember again, stars of heaven, stars meaning angels, and threw them to the earth. So verse 9 identifies this dragon. Who's the dragon? Satan. As we saw earlier, the Bible uses stars, as we've already said, as a symbol for angels. And this apparently indicates that a third of the angels, stars, followed Satan in this rebellion and were cast down to the earth with him. And the attempted takeover of heaven was, of course, unsuccessful. 2/3 of the angels remained loyal to God and thus constituted a more numerous force. More importantly, God is omnipotent, which means all-powerful and cannot be overthrown. Jesus said that the devil, fell like lightning from heaven. And this reference is found in Luke 10:18. And it seems likely that this titanic, if you will, struggle is what brought about the chaotic and wasted condition of the earth described in Genesis 1:2. So at the beginning of this episode, that was what we were talking about. He created and it was like this and it was like that. Then how did it turn into devastation? It is because of the fall, because of the rebellion. And that resulted in that. So as mentioned earlier, God then renewed the surface of the earth in preparation for human habitation, as described in the rest of Genesis chapter 1. Yet, to aid his purpose in developing righteous character in human beings, God allowed Satan